Bitcoin is on its way to becoming the global reserve currency and maybe more sooner than we think. When you have a money that is more effectively storing time, you feel more of an abundance of time and you feel less pressure on how you're spending your time. Because we don't have effective tools simply for saving, we've really lost touch with the concept of just saving. We need to solve the problem of being able to save, and I think Bitcoin is really this, modern Renaissance 2.0 version of a savings tool. Monetary entropy is a system where an increasing amount of energy over time is unavailable to do what it's meant to do, and the byproduct of that is that the system itself makes less and less sense. I think that we need to get to a place where Bitcoin is spent. How soon that needs to happen, my opinion would be.
Hi Scott, how are you doing? Everything fine on your end?
Great, yeah, Robin, I'm super pumped to be back, man. Appreciate you inviting me on.
Absolutely, I love the first one, so I was like, let's do a second one. And it's really interesting. We just talked about that that you're trying to give that vintage vibe if in your company to remember to make people remember the old times, the golden times, if you will. And so you also think that Bitcoin brings that those gold. If I remember correctly, I think you said there's a golden age of reasoning coming. Did I remember that correctly?
Yeah, I have this idea about it's not my idea, but one of the Bitcoin ideas I really love is the concept of monetary entropy. And it's the idea that inside the fiat monetary system, so entropy, it can be defined a few different ways. One way to describe it is sort of a measure of disorder or chaos. And the nature of entropy in a system is that it increases over time. And so monetary entropy is a system where an increasing amount of energy over time is unavailable to do what it's meant to do, and the byproduct of that is that the system itself makes less and less sense. And we all make sense of the world with money. It makes sense to me that then as we go forward into the world and we try to make sense of the price of an apple or how much we should be paid for an hour of our work, we're increasingly trying to go out and communicate with each other and build a civilization using a measuring stick that is sort of intrinsically itself nonsensical. And so this is why I think we're really seeing what's going on in the world today. I think that we are seeing an increased measure of disorder in the fundamental base layer of one of the tools that we all use to make sense of reality. And so talking about golden age of reason, this is like the idea that in the distant past, when we had much more order, this is when we saw the most beautiful buildings in the world being built, the most low time preference decisions being made as a group. And this is the art and architecture that you see throughout Europe from sort of the long 19th century, American independence to the start of World War I. There was almost no inflation or very minimal fluctuation in price compared to what we experience now. And I think uncoincidentally during that time was a high time of flourishing of civilization. So, back to like the branding and the good old days. I was born in 1980. I'm a kid of the 80s. I had older siblings. And so the 70s stuff was very much like present in my childhood. Star Wars and Barbarella and all of that stuff. And so I do also think that within our own lifetimes now, most people, depending on how old you are, have observed this accelerating disorder in society that is a downstream problem of how money was working. It is absolutely 100% true that life was just a lot simpler when money worked better. And many of us are old enough to remember that life. And this is kind of that life of, we used to get out and ride a bike. We used to actually go to restaurants with each other and not worry about what people were doing elsewhere. We could just sit and talk to each other. We, fundamentally how we thought about interacting with the world was different. We didn't used to pay attention to the price of stocks multiple times a day. All of these things are making life sort of more complicated, more stressful, making it harder. And this is why I think what we really want to help people understand is that, among other things, Bitcoin is a tool that can provide a level of order back to human civilization by, really allowing us to plan for the future with certainty. When we can all sort of come to an agreement around the rules of how money works, that is sort of the base step for things to become simpler, for people to think about things in a very simple way. Many of the greatest stresses that we have right now, the price of desirable assets becoming further and further out of reach, your paycheck not going as far as it used to and causing you to have to have sleepless nights about how you're going to pay your bills or have the kind of life you want to have. These are all things that I think are problems that can be addressed with Bitcoin, which is really exciting. But the biggest challenge is helping, the rest of most of the world understand how we get there. And so, yeah, it's an exciting time, man. I think that we are seeing, like, among other things, tariffs and what's going on in the global economy right now. These are symptoms of the system really being ready, I feel, for a larger scale awakening or an understanding of a potential alternative solution to all these problems.
That's super interesting. I just had that one story in my head when you were talking, because when you mentioned stock prices in the charts, I had a train ride. It was around 2 hours, and I sat next to a guy who literally for 2 hours straight, he looked at his phone, which is not very common, but he only looked at stocks. I mean, I only looked like 3-4 times, but any time I looked there, he looked at stocks and meme coins, and the price of it. And it was so hard for me to ignore that, because it was so funny that for 2 hours, he just constantly looked and just checked out the charts. And maybe he also bought and sold. I don't know what he did there. But it was just so interesting for me. And the whole 2 hours, I was just researching for my book and look into the printing press and how this might relate to Bitcoin. And it was such a nice contrast of two people sitting next to each other, the one really into the meme coins and fiat world, entrenched and probably trapped into like, hey, let's make some money to like make whatever. I mean, I did not have a conversation with him, would have been maybe interesting, but it was an interesting contrast that I experienced there.
Oh, totally. And this is like a completely new phenomenon. Like 30 years ago, people would read the paper, maybe listen to the radio sporadically throughout the day, or watch the news at 6 p.m. at night. And that was it. And people were not constantly plugged into the continual never-ending stream of global events, the continual fluctuation of the price of everything. Like, there are so many conversations happening like intraday about like what is going on with Bitcoin, and like, Bitcoin is on its way to becoming the global reserve currency, and maybe more sooner than we think. And that's not something that's going to happen probably like inside one single day ever. So it's just a funny, we're all products of the system. We all live in this society together. And I think this is that thing, the problem of entropy and money. We're all just trying to make sense of a nonsensical problem. And so we get all kinds of outputs and all kinds of like different ways people are trying to, use human ingenuity to figure out this thing that just really, I don't know if it can be figured out.
It's super interesting as you mentioned that, because I sometimes get the feedback of like, oh, like you record 2 weeks ahead of time. So like when we record this at like 11th of April, and this will probably come out at beginning of May. So it's like an 3 weeks old episode. Yeah. And it's super interesting because people have this need like, oh, I have to get this conversation directly now and right when it was recorded, because otherwise it's like old news. I'm like, how does it matter? Because as you said, like Bitcoin is on the way to be the world reserve asset, and it's interesting to talk about the implications and then how it gets there. But like everything else is kind of noise. What's happening with tariffs and the implications of Bitcoin, and if Trump said that about Bitcoin or not, or Elon Musk is not, like it's fun to talk about, but in the end of the day, it's noise.
Yeah, totally. It's 75,000, 85,000, like we're going to be pricing things in Bitcoin one day. And I don't know when that day is, but, I know it's coming.
How much is this focus on maybe news and this constant stream of information that we are so obsessed with? How much is this because of technology, because we have now the possibility to do that, because in the past we didn't even had phones and stuff like that, where it was able to be always connected and in there? And how much is it the broken money system and the high time preference?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think they are probably very intricately intertwined. Um, the concept of 24/7, connection to everywhere in the world through a device that is you're holding in your hand most of the day is super new. And I almost think of it like how, I'm in Canada. The First Nations communities in Canada didn't have a history with alcohol. And so alcohol was introduced into their societies very abruptly, and they didn't have the same long period of time of developing the technology and having it then become sort of slowly integrated into a culture. And so that those cultures here had almost no ability to interact with that substance. And it just became a massive problem, and it still is a massive problem here. And I think the same way about cell phones and social media technology. We really have had an explosion of these things. People are using them probably, without a lot of intention or self-reflection. It becomes an automatic thing. You don't really have an opportunity to unplug if you don't want to, because this is just the nature of how we communicate now. But we are really, truly in the very early stages of trying to understand what this is doing to human connectivity, to time preference. I really think that social media has been a really catastrophic driver of diminishing our attention spans and our ability to focus. So, like we used to have to wait. When I was a kid, if there was a show on TV that you wanted to watch that was on Thursday night at 7, there was no way in the world to watch that show before 7 p.m. on Thursday, and you just had to wait. And then if you couldn't be there at 7, you'd set up your recorder and you'd watch it, and then you could watch it on your own time after. Flash forward, we started streaming videos on YouTube, and then, sort of shorter videos on Instagram. It came to TikTok, and like on TikTok, it's like, if you don't catch someone's attention within like 3 or 5 seconds or whatever the number is, they're on to the next video. So like we're seeing this like intense compression of attention span, and I do think it's intimately related to the way money's working. Money is a measure of energy and time. So when you have a money that is more effectively storing time, I think you feel more of an abundance of time, and you feel less pressure on how you're spending your time. So we did used to move slower. We did used to enjoy ourselves a lot more, and we didn't do things, like those kinds of behaviors probably just wouldn't have happened at that time. But now, I believe there's some sort of subconscious awareness in all of us that as the accelerating devaluation of money is happening everywhere, we all understand that our time is being devalued and stolen from us. And so because of that, there's a fear around how we spend the time that we do have. And so this is why we're only willing to give a video 3 seconds chance, because we maybe that 1 minute that we have to scroll some video for some kind of enjoyment has become that precious for us. It's a really sad place to be. And yeah, man, I hope we can cycle around and change this, because I wonder what the floor is for the compression of our collective attention spans.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see when we have, and Twitter is becoming more and more TikTok-y. I've seen from the attention span, the content is different, I feel like, but the algorithm is working very much the same, I think. And we talked about that before on Twitter, like paying people in Bitcoin. How was your experience with how this changes relationships when we now exchange this fiat dollar to Bitcoin? Because on a logical level, it shouldn't change that much, but I've seen that it changes a lot, because the person behind could also just directly convert into the Bitcoin when it's the same amount. How was your experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that any kind of economic exchange work is a value exchange. And when there is a subconscious understanding that the mechanism for that exchange has some kind of theft built into it, or we're using a money that we would probably prefer not to if we didn't have to. I think that that's going to influence the interaction. So it could be the purchase and sale of a good, but it especially to me applies to like the exchange of work. And so that's what we're trying to do. Block Rewards. Block Rewards is a Bitcoin only compensation and rewards software company. We're trying to build the world's best tools for paying people in Bitcoin. And our mission statement is harmonizing the energy exchange of value creation. And I think that this is really the problem that we need to fix, because employees continually need to earn more money because things are continually getting more expensive. That's not the employer's fault, but it does create a challenge in the relationship for people being fairly rewarded for the work that they're doing. Employers have to pay people and recognize people for the work that they've done so that they continue to work and feel excited about the work they're doing. And so that's just a difficult thing to properly accomplish, and it's nobody's fault except for the people who are continually stealing from all of us by expanding the money supply at a faster and faster rate. And so I think that I'm bullish. We talked about this offline, but I personally think that the next step of Bitcoin adoption and creating a circular economy and onboarding the next massive wave of Bitcoiners is normalizing the concept of wanting to earn some Bitcoin at work. And it doesn't have to be a situation where people are, all switching hard stop to a Bitcoin standard and they're only being paid in Bitcoin, but Bitcoin as a reward, and interjecting Bitcoin into how we think about rewarding people for the work that they do is a really exciting start, and something that I think has sweeping ramifications for companies that want to get on board with this idea, starting to think differently about how they relate to their employers, to their employees, and how they, help their employees plan for the future with certainty. Good employers care a lot about their staff and their mental health and the well-being of their staff, and they want their staff to stick around and be productive. And great companies, don't typically experience high turnover. They have motivated employees that want to come to work and contribute to something bigger. And a big part of that, that we see all the time is like companies trying to figure out how to offer their staff things that will help them feel good about why they're working where they are. And these have, in the past been sort of fiat tools like pensions and savings benefits, bonuses. There are all kinds of different things that companies do to try to get creative to help people feel recognized and rewarded. But to me, inside all those tools still exists that measure of entropy and disorder. And it's because they're just all fiat tools, and that's nobody's fault. But if you think about when I go to work and I spend an hour of my time, like time is the single most finite thing that all of us have, because eventually the one thing we have all in common is that we are all going to die. We are all going to leave this world. And so we do all have a finite amount of time. And so what we are really trying to do, I think most of us, when we go to work, is make the most of that time. So with the time that we have left, our free time, our future time when we hope to not work one day, is that energy has been well spent and conserved. And this is what really Bitcoin is offering people. But it's really what it's offering employees and employers is an ability to effectively store the energy and time that is contributed to something bigger, so that those people can do that in such a way that they feel rewarded properly and feel like they've made a good use of their time. They can live that simpler life, right? Like, this is getting back to the idea of like, this is how people used to live. And, you go way back. I had this conversation a few weeks ago with the guys from Cartwright in the UK, talking about, they're doing some really cool things with paying people in Bitcoin too. And if you go back to that long 19th century, that period of high culture in Europe, that was really like predating investing. Nobody was investing, not workers, certainly. And so what people would have done is you would have earned money And you would have kind of had two choices with that money. You would have either saved it or you would have spent it. And anything you were probably going to save, you probably would have just, put it into gold coins or precious metals. And the purpose for that was exactly what it's meant to be. We didn't used to need to gamble half of our money or the money that we had left to try and grow it into more money so that we could feel like we were preserving our energy and time. 100, 200 years ago, we would have just had a more effective tool for storing that energy and time. And this is why I think it's what has really become missing out of the fundamental way people think about financial planning is because we don't have effective tools simply for saving. We've really lost touch with the concept of just saving. And even our grandparents, would have, had cash or bonds would have been a more effective way of low risk, sort of low time preference tool for saving for the future. We need to solve the problem of being able to save, and I think Bitcoin is really this, modern Renaissance 2.0 version of a savings tool.
Super interesting. It's also interesting when we look at what Bitcoin can do on a personal level with all the people that we already see in the Bitcoin sphere. And then when you think of, okay, what happens if Bitcoin actually becomes mainstream and we're going from 0.5% adoption, because I don't think we are at 3 to 4% adoption, which a lot of people say. And then we come to 50, 60, 70% adoption where most of the people are into Bitcoin. It's also, there was recently one of my favorite guests from my audience on the podcast, Jeff Booth, and for the second time, and he said something interesting that I never heard someone say that clearly. He said, if Bitcoin fails as a medium of exchange, it will also fail as a store of value. Do you agree with that?
That's a good question. Firstly, I'm a huge fan of Jeff. And I am a monetary maximalist, and I do think that people need to spend Bitcoin. I do think it needs to be adopted as money. I think that medium exchange is something that follows store of value. And so what we don't understand, because we've never been alive for the monetization of a commodity in real time, is how long that process takes and at what point we can determine whether things are a success or have failed. So I think that Bitcoin right now is really proving itself out as a store of value. And what drives medium of exchange over time is people's willingness to accept it as the broader understanding of store of value happens. So there are no rules about this as far as I understand. And I would caution to say that I think at times we can get into trying to feel certain about how soon things should or shouldn't happen. It might take 50 years for Bitcoin to become a broadly, globally understood, prime tool for store of value. And if that was true, then probably along the way there would be long periods of time where a lot of people would feel like it has failed. And so I just think that we really need to try to balance our own sort of internal opinions about what is urgent, and I think a lot of these things have to do with personal opinions as opposed to nobody knows. So I agree. I think that we need to get to a place where Bitcoin is spent. How soon that needs to happen, my opinion would be nobody knows.
It's super interesting. The definition of Bitcoin has failed, because it's actually not that easy. I mean, obviously, if it's gone and there's no market, and the coin doesn't exist and the network doesn't exist, then it's obvious. And beyond that, probably it can never be really considered as failed. Do you see Bitcoin only as failed if the network and the coin itself disappears?
Yeah, I mean, if there was some kind of like catastrophic technical failure in the protocol, obviously that would be one scenario. But as long as the fiat money system is infinitely inflating and some significant percentage of the population understand that a finite form of money is a way to insulate yourself from that problem, and it works, then it's hard for me to understand a scenario where more and more people don't understand that idea over time. I think that it's obvious that that's happening. At this point, I think it's inevitable that countries in a large scale are going to start using this tool to protect from each other's money printing. And that could already be very well happening at a significant scale. You have to remember too that the fiat system, I believe, has no intention of going out easily. So medium of exchange is going to, in my mind, be the part where there is the most resistance from the establishment in the current system. So, you know, essentially how I think it'll probably play out is, Bitcoin gets to some kind of absurd number. It's just going to pull people away from wanting to use the money that is losing value in Bitcoin terms so quickly that it becomes difficult to justify people to accept it. And so, it's really at that point where merchants, if we get to a point in time where merchants are hesitant to accept dollars or euros, because of it just makes sense to them that they would rather have Bitcoin, that then all of a sudden it could happen very quickly. So I think store of value is by far the most important concept for the global population to grasp. And I think that is on track. Hal and Satoshi, in their own early writings, kind of had 2030 like pegged as this time, which is just such an interesting thing to me because the fourth turning was talking about 2030 in the 90s, and the kind of globalist WEF stuff is talking about 2030. You'll own nothing and be happy. So it's almost like if there's a simulation or however it works, we're moving towards a moment in time where there's going to be things that change a lot. I think we are in the middle of a process that's happening, and so it's really difficult to tell. It's not like we're on a train trip from Berlin to Amsterdam and we know exactly how long it's supposed to take and we can tell if we're ahead or behind schedule. It's something that is really complex, that involves entities at the highest level and individual people at the lowest level, people all over the world. And back to your point about what we were saying earlier about the hyperconnectivity of social media, I do, for all of the things that are bad, one of the things that is really incredible about it is that ideas are being shared also at an accelerating rate. And, we've got this kind of like intellectual kindling that is smoldering now, and it's an idea, right? So Bitcoin, I think, among other things, most importantly, is an idea. And it's an idea about how money can be different. And this is something that the more people understand it, the more people there are to help other people understand it. So this is really, to me, what the price is a measure of, and what the store of value conversation, the pace of the conversation about store of value at the end of the day is really rooted in is how many people understand this idea.
How do you look at unit of account? For me, like Bitcoin as a medium of exchange already works. So I have an increasingly amount of my business flow that I get paid in Bitcoin and directly pay in Bitcoin. It gets bigger and bigger, and the fiat part gets smaller and smaller, which is amazing because in Bitcoin is everything so much better. I have people in Colombia and El Salvador with whom I work, and in America. So having said that, setting that everything up with fiat is complicated and expensive, and with Bitcoin it's actually way cheaper and way more, simpler. You just need an address and you just send it there. But I always still do everything unit of account in either dollars or euros. Because it's just fluctuating right now too much and it would be unpredictable. Do you have already someone that you see, or maybe yourself, where they're moving to a Bitcoin unit of account, or is that just way too early for that?
Yeah, I mean, I do know people. I know lots of people now through my travels in Bitcoin that totally live on a Bitcoin standard and measure things in Bitcoin. To me, it really is the most abstract way of thinking, and it requires the biggest change for you to get there. And so even for myself, like, I would be lying to say that I think about the world that way. So I wouldn't, so for me, unit of account is by far the last thing that will happen. And that could be a really long time. And if it's not, then we're in for a kind of a real roller coaster of, because, if all of a sudden people were trying to understand why their house that they thought was worth $1 million was worth 0.04 Bitcoin, and they had to kind of catch up to try and figure out what that means. It's going to be really, really disruptive. So unit of account is like, it doesn't feel like a very pressing or urgent problem for me. It is certainly something that requires a lot of Bitcoin study to get there. And I think it's something that will happen more naturally. So like where we will probably get to, and this might be the 2030s, is where you start to see side-by-side prices. There's going to have to be probably an extended period of time where you're seeing, and then what you'll see instead of today, you're trying to measure things in Bitcoin and seeing this fluctuation. If you were seeing side-by-side prices 10 years from now, I think what you would see is the fiat price will be the one fluctuating, and it will be fluctuating higher and higher and higher next to the Bitcoin price. And but that's like a much larger and more established and more powerful Bitcoin network.
Yeah, it's really. I mean, I do already try to think in terms of net worth and increasing my Satoshi numbers each month in that sense in unit of account of Bitcoin. But that is just for myself. But yeah, the thing where we're like, okay, let's fix a price of that amount of Satoshis you pay me or I pay you. And that with the Bitcoin price, and yeah, people say, yeah, one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin. But if Bitcoin goes up from 100,000 to 200,000, also the purchasing power of Bitcoin goes up, not just measured in the US dollar. There's like a real world implication of that.
I mean, the acquisition cost, right? So like I've heard stories about people who negotiated like very early on contracts priced in Bitcoin and are now owed like insane amounts of money because I mean, if businesses need to be thinking about the appreciating price of Bitcoin like on a 5-year contract, then yeah, it is almost has a reverse problem. So I don't know that it's even really possible right now, given the current state we are in the long-term evolution of Bitcoin.
I would be very cautious when like someone comes, oh, please pay me in Bitcoin, and we set out a price in Bitcoin per month for the next 2 years. I'm like, I don't know if I can pay that in 2 years.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the only way you could is if all of your contracts were also denominated totally in Bitcoin. But I would be hesitant too. I wouldn't blame you.
Let's take a break for a moment and appreciate the beauty that Coin Vigilante has made with the Bitcoin watches. Those watches are the most amazing, the most elegant way of showing that you are a true Bitcoiner. And Coin Vigilante just dropped a completely new and amazing Genesis edition of their watch collections. You have the date of the first ever mined Bitcoin block in there, and of course also the block height and which epoch we are currently in. I love the level of detail they put in this masterpiece. Make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. And now if you have Bitcoin, I really do hope that you don't have it on exchange. But if you do have it on exchange, I have 2 ways for you to deal with that. The first way is you put it on a hardware wallet. That's the entry for you to get into the self-custody game. I recommend BitBox, Bitcoin only edition for that. It's a super simple and secure way. And if you check out the link in the description, you even get 5% off if you use the code Robin. And the second way is the Bitcoin Way. The Bitcoin Way is your all-in partner in terms of how to get the most out of your your sovereignty. They will personalize for you a self-custody setup that is perfect for your individual situation. They will show you how you can secure your own devices. Securing your Bitcoin is not enough. You also have to keep all your devices secure. One topic that is overlooked often is the inheritance plan. What happens with your Bitcoin once you are no longer here? Do you have a plan for that in place already? And last but not least, if you're in the jurisdictions where you don't feel safe, it's better to get a plan B. For all that, head over to thebitcoinway.com/Robin to get a 30-minute free call. And just a quick side note, I will be for the first time ever speaking at the Bitcoin Prague event in June. It will be absolutely legendary, and I'm really looking forward to seeing all of you there. You can get your ticket in the link down in the description of Bitcoin Prague, and very important, use code Robin to get 10% off your ticket. I'm really looking forward seeing you there. One thing that is interesting when we look at the Bitcoin world merging with the fiat world and using the fiat games to get more Bitcoin with credits, with mortgages, with all those things. I mean, we have a famous example with Michael Seyr that plays that game probably better than anyone else. But there are a lot of people that do those with mortgaging their home, even with consumer credits. We had one guy on that just maxed out all their credit cards and just bought more Bitcoin, and he tracked everything in an Excel sheet for like 2-3 years, and it worked out amazing for him, even with a high interest rates. But it's a dangerous play. How do you look at using the fiat system and using it in a way to get more Bitcoin? Is that Bitcoiner-like, or is that just playing dumb games to maybe win a stupid prize?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think of it as like, it's just being smart, in my opinion, of, we can't do anything about the infinite creation of fiat money other than take that money hose and plug it into, it's like if you had a leaf blower that had a never-ending amount of air to be sucked into it, and you had a balloon that could take all of the air in the world, you would be crazy to not do that. And so that's what I really think of Bitcoiners who are doing all these various strategies. If you understand Bitcoin, that our money is going to be intentionally devalued, and the rate at which it becomes devalued is going to accelerate. So the smartest thing you can do is get as much of it as you can, as fast as you can, and put it into the thing that is going to, be able to absorb as much of that monetary expansion as possible. So that's really what Bitcoin is. And I think that people, will look back at people like Seyr and understand that they were visionaries and that they understood something very important earlier than almost everybody. And this is, I think it's the thing that ends up really highlighting or exposing the fatal flaw of fiat money. It's like a global short squeeze on paper money printing. And so this happens when sort of an uncontrollable amount of fiat money starts being pushed into Bitcoin, and that thing triggers eventually sort of like a herd mentality, panic to push all of a sudden all of the money in, and that's when the game is over. Like it's so I think these people, especially Seyr and some of the other institutions that are doing it, because of the amount of money that they have to do it and the high profile nature of who they are like really important catalysts in starting that kind of herd stampede. The other people will follow. If Bitcoin goes to some kind of insane price, whether it's this year or in 4 years, and Saylor's managed to hold his entire stack for that time, MicroStrategy will be the most valuable company in the world. And when that happens, a bunch of executives at Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 1000 companies are going to have to either do the same or explain to their shareholders and their boards why they didn't have the same idea or why they thought about it and decided not to. And so there's all kinds of like really interesting game theory scenarios that I think people, very powerful people, maybe don't know are happening and aren't aware that they're not participating in, but they kind of are participating in it by choosing, like Apple, and there've been a few other big companies that considered treasury and declined, and that's all part of it too. So I'm bullish, man, and I think like GameStop is a really interesting example because of who they are and the sort of like mimetic nature of the recent history of that company, but also the kinds of people who are buying the GameStop stock as a way to, say screw you to the hedge fund shorters. And, you put GameStop and Bitcoin together, and you could really have an explosive kickoff to a forced rethink of how companies think about holding Bitcoin.
It's the game start. no, it's a game on.
Game on.
Stock. It's really interesting. I love your leaf blower example. It makes it so. It makes it really imaginable because we're blowing that air into Bitcoin. I mean, a balloon would eventually blast if you do it too much. But with
Bitcoin is like this balloon that could take all of the air in the world. So exactly. It's like, yeah, I mean, I think back to this example of like the earlier thought about entropy, like we're talking about like a chemical reaction where there's an unintentional byproduct of heat. And that heat, it's like a light bulb that's meant to only make light, but it also gets hot. And so there's energy wasted when that happens. And if you had a system instead that used all of the energy that was being put in for the useful purpose of the thing, then that's like a perfect system, a system that has no wasted energy. And so that system can't help but perform in a superior way to the system that has waste. So this is like, back to this argument about medium of exchange. I think that it's happening. Like Bitcoin is doing it. It's just like that we all have to also kind of like wrestle with the reality that we live in this hyper low time, high time preference society. And all of us, like, even if we can escape it to some degree and take a longer term view of things, we do still walk around every day in this like cell phone, TikTok society, and that's going to affect everyone. And it's going to make us all experience some level of urgency to think things need to happen probably faster than they do.
Absolutely. It's like we have to be patient with it, and I see sometimes where Bitcoiners and people are getting upset because the price has been down for like 3 weeks. And I'm like, like look out for the 5-year development, look out for the 10-year development. It's just like short-term thing.
Go ride a bike.
Go ride a bike. I love that. You wrote and we talked about it in the last episode with you, the DAO of Bitcoin. And I saw you also wrote now a new book called Bitcoin for Financial Advisors. How did that come to be? Like, why did you write that?
Yeah, so I actually wrote that book first. That was my first stab.
You wrote interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that book kind of came out quietly with little fanfare. I was pretty early in my own Bitcoin journey. My personal story, and how all this stuff started. I was in traditional finance for the majority of my career. I kind of have 15 years in financial services retail, and most of the work that I was doing was around compensation and rewards, pension plan consulting, and I found Bitcoin in 2020 because I was worried about the impact of money printing on fixed income, specifically as how bond markets would relate inside asset portfolios for pensions. So because of that, like my entire professional social network were financial advisors, and I got orange pilled and I started running around in 2020 talking to everybody about how Bitcoin was going to be this thing that was going to totally change the way pensions worked and the way we thought about portfolio allocation. And it seemed so obvious to me. And basically what happened was, like, over 3 or 6 months, I had 50 or 100 people tell me I've like totally gone off the deep end and I'm completely insane. And this is like when Bitcoin was like, I don't know, 16,000 It's very different times, right? To go back to your like, tell me about 5 years. So I wrote that book mostly as I just wanted to have a way to condense all of those conversations I'd had into a single conversation. So it's kind of like a casual Bitcoin read geared at people who have a background selling traditional financial services products. And, it's definitely has a Canadian slant. So it could have been called Bitcoin for Canadian Financial Advisors, but I have had people who've read it in Australia, the UK, and it's kind of similar enough that I think the book works. But it was really from there. That was when I learned a lot writing that book, and it was that book that prepped me to write Dial Bitcoin, which is a book that I feel is like kind of much more clearly articulates my personal feelings about what's going on, and something I resonate with a lot more. So I actually don't talk about the first book a ton, and that's probably why you thought it was new, because it's kind of out there. If people want to read it, it's on Amazon. But yeah, Dial Bitcoin is kind of my baby.
Yeah, I was seeing it today because we talked last time about the DAO of Bitcoin. I think the whole episode was basically around that book, and I was going to your website and I saw the second one. I was like, oh, he brought out a new book, and I was really curious. Like financial advice, it's an interesting. It was a weird step from the DAO of Bitcoin to financial advisor. So I was curious about that. Really interesting. Also, I think like 3, 4 like certified financial advisors already on the show, and it's super interesting. Always this conversations of, isn't Bitcoin kind of demolishing the financial advisors if we can save again in Bitcoin and it's obvious, and we don't need a portfolio manager. Yeah, maybe we need tax advisors, maybe we need other things in the fiat world, but yeah, maybe even taxes are getting less and a little bit simplified in that world. How do you think is the role of financial advisors in a post Bitcoin world, or like in a Bitcoin world?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think probably mostly gone. These are, and it's not to disparage anybody. I just think that they're sort of like, it's a profession that is going to become a little bit dated. So we will still need tax planning and insurance planning, but the case to be made for gambling on a basket of companies instead of just saving your money when there is a global understanding around a preferred tool for saving is going to be hard for people to bite. And we have really normalized investing. And even that's something that's really changed a lot. So, it was kind of the 60-40 portfolio, and people used to have a mix of stocks and bonds, and then they would also just have some savings. And a sort of a broad trend that I think is fair to say has happened mostly everywhere in the Western world over the last 20 or 30 years is a migration to most of the portfolios for people. And certainly with self-directed investing becoming a much more common thing, is people being entirely allocated to stocks, and that becoming a very normal idea. So that's also something that's really new. I don't think that that's sustainable, and I also don't think it makes any sense. Like, we have tons of zombie companies in every major economy in the world. The way the global economy is just changing so much that it's really not the same environment that we had in the 70s or 80s, where you might be able to pick companies and feel certain that they were going to be around in 20 or 30 years, 50 years. I think that I think people are going to just have to think about accumulating wealth differently. And if you have a form of money that has a fixed set of rules and you're able to accumulate that is like accumulating gold coins in 1850. And that is something that probably, if given the choice between truly being able to save and having to gamble, I think most people would probably choose save, because most people are kind of more risk averse. Not everybody's trying to become rich. Most people are trying to protect their energy and time. So I think that the way we think about planning for the future is going to change a lot, and it's going to remove a lot of the products that have been created, these sort of hyper financialized, hyper fiat products. And I think that it's just going to get a lot simpler for the people who want it to be simpler.
I sometimes think that when we get to Bitcoin somewhere along in the transition period, there must be either a gradual or sudden wipe out event of all those zombie companies, of all that bloated fiat system. And it will be really cruel for people that don't get Bitcoin but are very exposed to fiat. Sometimes it worries me.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think that it's possible we're also on a collision course for some kind of an event that could be driven by AI, where there comes a moment in time where all of a sudden, AI employees, robots, I mean, there's just going to be a ton of change, and I don't know how soon it's going to happen, but I think we're headed for a very different landscape with work, with zombie companies, with fiat products, like the whole thing. And this is kind of another Jeff Booth idea, right? Is this the ultimate challenge of the solvency of the system is that it requires the price of everything to go up forever. And if the credit based nature of how we built everything implodes, everything has to go. So nobody's house is worth what they think it's worth. I mean, that doesn't mean you can't sell it for the price that you think it's worth now. But all of these asset prices are just a weird sort of abstraction of the permanently expanding supply of money.
How do you actually, I mean, it's a totally unrelated, a little bit unrelated question, but how do you actually use AI? Do you probably use it in some capacity?
Yeah, we use it a lot for research. I'd say the where we're using it most today is for research, and it's incredible. You can get it to digest different documents. I've been really shocked at times of how the AI tools have the ability to like remember the different conversations you've had and start to make inferences about how these things work together. And like a really specific example I could share is, I'm talking to ChatGPT all the time about block rewards and our different products and how we can write copy about the products, how we might build ads, so it's obviously built some kind of understanding of what we're doing. And a couple of weeks ago, I was asking it. We weren't talking about block rewards, and I asked it for a model, if it could build me a model for how software as a service companies think about staffing salespeople. And it replied, "Sure. Do you want me to build you a staffing model for block rewards and Bitcoin savings plan?" And so it did that on its own, and which is pretty wild. These are like very small examples, but yeah, I mean, we're super bullish on the idea that AI and are going to be paid, and they're going to be paid in Bitcoin, and this is something that we have on our internal roadmap at Block Rewards too. I think that some of these ideas might seem pretty weird, but this is from what I've seen. I think this is the future we're headed towards.
It's also, if you think about, there are already the beginning stages of AI agents that just do things for you with you interacting with it. And this will just get crazier, faster, better, and more human-like than ever. Yeah. An AI agent probably can at some point very soon replace an entry-level job. You had to get some assistant or someone for that, and you just employ that AI agent, pay a couple $100 maybe per month versus a couple $1,000 per month, the AI agent. And then it's also interesting, what if that AI agent works together with another AI agent? It's so natural for them to use Bitcoin. Why would they have a fiat account?
They won't. And to me, like, it's obvious that AI will understand Bitcoin before humanity does, because it's just the most rational choice. And this is entirely, AI will be able to remove any of the feeling around it, and it will just make the most rational decision. So AI will transact in Bitcoin. AI will accumulate Bitcoin. Max Kaiser has been talking about this for a really long time. There's sort of this bigger idea that AI and Bitcoin are kind of like the yin yang, like they're actually intrinsically linked. And I also think this is a fascinating notion about the concept of the singularity and where we might go with a future civilization synergy with AI is that AI has this unlimited hunger for energy consumption, for an endless growth of compute. And sort of the only real check and balance to that system is something that is an infinite consumer of energy that can price energy. And so I think that there's a natural harmony and synergy between AI and Bitcoin, the Bitcoin network. And I think that I had a really interesting conversation a few months ago with Jesse Schrader from Amboss Technologies, and he'd be a great guest for you if you have never talked to Jesse. Awesome guy. And Amboss is building an AI tool that automatically rebalances lightning channels liquidity. And so they envision sort of a global system where AI is automatically rebalancing lightning channels to make sure that large payments at scale never experience failure. And so this is like one really specific example where I think we can imagine a future where AI and Bitcoin almost become fused together, and this kind of becomes like the backbone for kind of post-fiat world.
I just pulled it up. I think I had him on the podcast. Let's show it to people.
I know you've had everybody on because you've done so many pods, but if you're listening, check that episode out. You can check out my episode with Jesse. Super smart guy, very entertaining.
Absolutely, he's really, really good, and it was an amazing episode. We talked about the machine economy, and it's such an amazing term, machine economy. I've never heard it before, and he talked about it, which was absolutely cool. And I can just recommend this guy also, Jesse. It was really cool to have him on the podcast. But yeah, I'm approaching 500 different guests on the podcast. So if you wonder if I had him on, most likely I had him on. Really cool. I love that. That's really cool. One thing before we end the podcast, I want to get your take on is kind of where we are currently in Bitcoin and what happened since the last episode. You've been on, I think, a year, a little bit over a year, maybe even on the podcast, and so much has happened since then. How do you look at reaching 100K, Trump, and all the things that happened in Bitcoin?
Great question. Yeah, I think it's astounding that we breached 100,000 and almost hit 110, and like basically nobody cared. Like the world didn't really notice. There was no FOMO. It just was something that happened, and I think like Samson's idea that we are gonna now, like, the next step is really to just start talking about it as 0.1 M. I think this is kind of where we're headed. Again, I think these things take time, but like it was very shortly after the 100,000 Bitcoin that the Trump administration and kind of what we've seen since, regardless of what the price action of Bitcoin has done during the time, there's a lot of moving pieces in the global financial markets right now. We're in really sort of uncharted waters. And I think Bitcoin has held up incredibly well. And who knows, like you said, we hear this in 2 weeks, things could look a lot different. But I think that the world is starting to converge around the idea that Bitcoin is a safe haven. And all of the elements are there for some people to decide that sooner than others at a large scale. So what do I think has been going on? I think it's incredible. And it's the funniest kind of bull market, and I've only been around for 2. I will say what I've seen so far is, it really is. And this is like an idea that I talk a lot about in DAO Bitcoin, is like the urgency for something to happen is something that is an internal, like that's happening for a collection of people inside them, and nothing about what that is happening, like nothing about that emotion will really impact what Bitcoin does, other than to say, if we all start to take certain actions as a result of that internal feeling, then like if everyone started panic selling, the price would go down. But ultimately, this thing is unfolding on its own. And like I said, I think we're at a probably the most exciting time ever. And it's also true at the same time that most people seem really frustrated. And the average person seems to think that Bitcoin is like, oh, I noticed that it's down a lot, which is, these like simultaneously true absurdities about this is how Bitcoin is. So, man, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Bitcoin was, a really crazy price like this year. And that might also not be true. But I think that whatever happens, in my opinion, it will happen when people release the expectation of it happening, or when they feel like finally that it's not going to happen. That's probably when it will happen.
Bitcoin always does what you don't expect it to do.
and nobody knows, like Jack doesn't know. Jeff doesn't know. These people, and they have really insightful opinions. That doesn't mean they're wrong. It's just that, like, it's just true that nobody knows. So, as much as we want to know, we all want to listen to people that we think know. Nobody does. Nobody knows.
Absolutely. We are only directionally right, and not like in like, oh, Bitcoin will hit this, because as you mentioned, Samson, and I will have him on probably in Prague. I'm really looking forward to that for the first time ever. But he said like, oh, like when we reach the 100K, we will rip through a million. I think something like that. He said he's also talking about the Omega candle. And I think actually he might be probably right that at some point comes like a really huge event where like people are like, oh shit, like something like a second time 2017. But he does not know which year and what it triggers. It might just happen, or might not just happen. Yeah. One thing, we talked so much about the DAO of Bitcoin, and our previous episode, just for people that are curious, that's the title, The World on a Bitcoin Standard, Scott Dedels. If you type in Scott Dedels, Bitcoin Robin, you find it instantly on YouTube. If you don't have enough of the both of us already, you can get another hour in India right now. So looking forward to that. Thank you so much, Scott, already for your insights. We have a question that I asked each and every one of my guests, and this is newer. I didn't ask you this last time, I think. And the question is, what can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
Sure. I would say, the other things that I spend a lot of time like tweeting about and talking about are things to do with kind of consciousness and the nature of reality. And this definitely relates into spirituality and Taoism. These are topics I'm really interested in. I'm really passionate about. I talk about them. So that's if you're interested in other stuff I might talk about, that's things you might find.
Really, really cool. And as you know, as we also had last time, we have an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest is asked you the question, what's something that you used to be afraid of that you no longer worry about in Bitcoin, and why?
I think that I would say I used to be worried about quantum computing. I'll choose quantum computing, and where I am at with it today is ultimately I think that it's an unknown. It's an unknown of potential arrival. It's something that I think Bitcoin, I would say I've become more confident in talking to different Bitcoiners around what they think Bitcoiners may be able to solve as a response. And so I feel like for people who are kind of quantum doomers, that there's a lot of thought already going into potential solutions. And it's also true that it could either never happen or it could be much farther into the future than we think. And so that would probably be mine.
That's super interesting. Yeah, my big thing is mining centralization. When I came into Bitcoin in 2020, I think 70 or over 70% was in China. And then China made the really cool decision to make the Bitcoin network stronger and more decentralized, while they are banning Bitcoin mining in China. And now I think the biggest country that has the most mining is probably America, with around like 30 to 40%. I mean, there's still topics with mining pools and the mining templates, but I think Ocean is working really good on that topic, and there are other really great people that work on that. So it's super interesting how we have those beliefs of like, oh, that's what I'm worrying about, and 3, 4, 5 years later, we're like, okay, this is also solved, this is also solved, this is also solved. Bitcoin apparently isn't going to be destroyed.
No, yeah, totally. That's a great one. I think that the mining conversation is fascinating, and there are some really cool things about how it's like an organism. This thing is built for survival. It's built for evolution, and it depends on the innate ingenuity of the people who are trying to make it better all the time. It's so cool.
Absolutely, 100% agree. Really cool. Thank you so much, Scott, for your time. Before I let you go, where can people find you, ask you questions, and reach out to you?
For sure. I'm on Twitter more than I should be. My handle is Lantern Bitcoin, and I'm also you can catch me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn a lot, and if you're listening and you're on LinkedIn, give Block Rewards a follow. We're trying to get every Bitcoiner on LinkedIn to follow Block Rewards as we try to like do our part in the LinkedIn community, our customers, our businesses, and we're trying to get as large a reach as possible on that platform. So give us a follow.
Really cool. Yeah, amazing work there. Thank you so much, Scott, for your time. Also, thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye.